I'm Richard Hanania, and you're watching Doom Debates.
Today, I'm going to take Richard for a ride on the Doom train. We're going to see exactly where he gets off.
It might plateau because you've run out of trading data.
How are you getting more than 75% chance on that?
Has AI killed anyone yet? I mean, has it taken over a country?
They're just not super intelligent yet.
I don't fear it. I just don't at a gut level. Superintelligence is here, it's in our pocket, and it's completely docile.
So you're really optimistic that in 2101, there's still going to be a thriving human civilization?
I mean, yeah. We've survived this long.
Welcome to Doom Debates. Richard Hanania is the president of the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology. He has a JD from the University of Chicago and a PhD in political science from UCLA. He published a 2023 book, The Origins of Woke, which I think has aged well. He's written opinion pieces for The Washington Post, New York Times, The Atlantic, The Economist, and Quillette. His work has been praised by Vice President JD Vance, Tyler Cowen, Bryan Caplan, Tucker Carlson, and Substack co-founder Hamish McKenzie. He's written a couple times on the topic of AI doom and why he doesn't find the doom argument convincing. So today I'm going to take Richard for a ride on the doom train, and we're going to see exactly where he gets off, i.e. find the cruxes of disagreement. Richard Hanania, welcome to Doom Debates.
Glad to be here, Liron. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I've been following your work for about a year and a half now, and I've gone back through the archives. I read The Origins of Woke, so I'm pretty familiar with a substantial portion of your body of work. And I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed that you're a very original thinker. I don't agree with everything, but I'm really glad you exist. I would say you've got some good, fresh takes.
Well, thank you. That's always a very nice thing to hear.
So as an independent thinker, I feel like people try to slap labels on you and you tend to defy the labels. Would you say you're currently being labeled far right-wing?
I don't know. People just say, yeah, right. I think the Wikipedia page first, the sentence says right-wing. I don't know. It's I'm not really that right-wing. I believe in free markets. I have some culturally conservative views, but some culturally very liberal views. But it's not a label I'm comfortable with.
Let me ask you about quality of discourse. Half of Doom Debates' mission is to improve the quality of discourse. What are your thoughts generally on the quality of discourse and how to improve it?
I think Twitter has ruined it, really. I think that we've gotten to the point where politics is more entertaining to people than a lot of pop culture is or whatever. Political issues, the culture is much, much stupider than it was 10, 20 years ago. But I think it's kind of this politics is an entertainment, infotainment model that's kind of destroyed things.
Do you think that you and I are now part of the infotainment model?
Yeah, in a sense, but we're not very good at it compared to other people. There's people, the biggest people in the infotainment model have, millions and millions of followers, and neither of us are that large. I think the ratio of how much we're informing or educating or elevating or making people think to how much we're entertaining them, hopefully we're entertaining them. But that ratio is kind of in a decent balance, while for a lot of other people, that ratio is whack. They're believing a lot of false things as they're getting entertained.
All right, so the heart of our talk today is going to be focused on P-Doom and existential risk from superintelligent AI. I really want to drill down because you've actually written a few thoughtful posts on the subject. So to kick off with, let me ask you the most important question. You ready for this?
Go ahead.
P-Doom, P-Doom, what's your P-Doom? What's your P-Doom? What's your P-Doom?
Richard Hanania, what's your P-Doom?
What time scale?
Let's say by 2040.
Oh, by 2040, 0.02.
2%?
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty low. Interesting. Okay, what about by 2100?
0.15, maybe.
Huh, so you think most of the doom risk is in the second half of the century?
No, wait, let me think about that. So yeah, when you put those together, no, I think that's probably going up too much. Yeah, probably 0.05. Yeah, I think it goes up. Yeah, AI has to get better. A lot has to happen. But yeah, but also if we've cleared 2040, then that indicates something too. So yeah, let me revise that down to 5%.
So basically 2% by 2040, 5% by 2100.
Yeah.
So you're really optimistic that in 2101, there's still going to be a thriving human civilization?
Yeah. We've survived this long. First of all, I mean, I'll say that I don't feel like I'm the most qualified person to talk about this because all my opinions on AI, I don't feel like I'm necessarily better positioned than a lot of people to think about these things. But I feel confident when I talk about politics or economics or whatever. But with AI, I have no particular expertise and I don't have, and that's fine. Sometimes I speak on things where I'm not the biggest expert on. But in this case, I'm not even that convinced. I don't find anyone has like a kind of a knockdown argument for the other side.
Mhm.
And so I kind of revert to skepticism on that basis. It's like this with theology too. Sometimes I'll hear a new argument for the existence of God or something, and I'll be like, or Christianity or something, and I'll be like, okay, but my default is like it's all kind of nonsense. And so, like, even if
Mhm.
I hear that one argument that sounds decent, I still kind of default to that. So, people who've been thinking about this for a long time and have really strong intuitions, they have really strong opinions based on what they've learned, don't put too much stock then into me and what I'm saying because I'm not that confident. My error bars are pretty large.
I definitely appreciate that epistemic humility, and we're going to dive into a post where you just spell out your thought process, presumably so people like me can help debug it. From my perspective, as somebody with PDoom of 50% roughly by 2040, I get your perspective of like, look, I'm tapping out. This isn't my issue. But I see it as important to get a really large fraction of the population to get on the same page that PDoom seems pretty high, like high enough that you kind of have to pay attention. So I think that's why I see conversations like this as productive.
What do you think? I mean, what can we do? That's not going to be like, what is kind of the political process that stops this train? Like, that's kind of my question too.
Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. That is a very hard question, right? So, and I'm not trying to pitch a really solid answer. My position is, I think we should be getting ready to pause. So we should have like infrastructure and chips to accept like a pause signal from, yes, a central authority. I know we libertarians hate a central authority. I don't feel like I have that much to contribute to the policy discussion. I think that my comparative advantage is just pointing out that we're stuck between a rock and the hard place, but I'm just pointing you to the rock, right? So like even if the hard place is hard, it's like look at this big rock. PDoom is high.
Yeah. But at what point do you stop things? Now? Is that your position?
I would stop them right about now, unfortunately, even though I love the AI progress as much as anybody, right? Super useful tools. I just think we're getting so close to the brink and it's so hard to stop that if we don't hit the brakes now, we're just being irresponsible as managers of our civilization. Like we're just taking a very irresponsible risk to just let it continue and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, if I had your P Doom too, yeah, I would say that the benefits of ChatGPT aren't that great. I mean, it's pretty good, but it's, not compared to
Right.
the end of humanity in 15 years.
Well, you've just done a move that's pretty rare, which is you hypothetically adopted my position and then answered corresponding to that. It's all too rare when people do that. I hope people are watching can appreciate, and I hope to keep doing it, on my side as well. Let me ask you this: do you currently take AI seriously enough that you would have signed the statement on AI risk, the one that says from 2023, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war?
Yeah, sure. You should treat it as seriously as you treat pandemics or nuclear war. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, great. So you're passing a lot of like the basic sanity checks, right? Like engaging with hypotheticals, saying that it's like a risk to be taken as seriously as nuclear war. So yeah, normally I put a boundaries around like 10 to 90% PDoom is what I call the sane zone. I don't really have a beef with somebody's like, yeah, it's a 10% chance, or even it's a 90% chance. 5% is getting a little insane to me. Certainly the people who are like less than 1%. I just think that's like so insane. Yeah, so you seem to be close to the sane zone.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that sound bad, and it's like, I mean, the base rate is low. So if you get up to 2% or 5%, to me, that's high because 99.9% of the things people worry about that are going to destroy the world are nowhere close to that. So, like, I think that's high compared to everything else in the world. You might think it's slow compared to like logic and evidence and kind of data and where we're heading.
Is there any particular intellectual that your view on AI doom aligns well with?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I did talk to Steven Pinker and Robin Hanson on these things. I found that, they're skeptics of doom. I was, interested. They gave me some new, perspectives. There was yeah, I don't know, like it kind of all runs together. That's another reason, like, I don't focus a lot on it because, like, a lot of things I could find new arguments. But, I've been following these debates for a while, and it's It's kind of the same argument, right?
Have you read much of Eliezer Yudkowsky or the Less Wrong sequences?
I've read some of Elizer's stuff, yeah.
What are your thoughts?
It's been so long, I can't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. I just know he believes in doom very strongly. It's been years and years, yeah.
I mean, if you want a good encapsulation of my perspective, it's almost entirely just agreeing with that stuff there. So reading that is kind of like, there's no point for me to write it all over again. You mentioned Robin Hanson and Steven Pinker. So for the audience, there's a debate with me and Robin Hanson from last year that I recommend checking out. As for Steven Pinker, I did actually do one episode about his position, just me reacting to him. He didn't come on the show. And I've read your mentions of Steven Pinker and your conversations with him. So I'm going to be bringing him up because from my perspective, his arguments seem like some of the most conclusively counter-argued or disproven, you might say. So we'll get into that in a second. I wanted to talk about doomer epistemology, and we covered this a little bit. We said, what's the base rate for doom? So this comes up a lot. The idea that a non-doom should just be our default because all the doomers in history was wrong. So are you sympathetic to that view that non-doom is a very hard default to update away from?
Non-doom is a difficult, yeah, of course.
Okay, well, one of the justifications that you've said in your posts, to quote your words, you said, the side that has an elaborate story to tell has the burden of proof to show that its imagined scenario is plausible. So I guess the question then becomes, which story is the least quote unquote elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I mean, the idea that humanity is going to die, it's pretty dramatic. I mean, it's something that happens, it's something that happens never before. It could happen. It's happened to other species, but never actually in this way. So there's never been any sample size. It's been kind of, humans have died, or humanoids have died because of disease or whatever, meteors have wiped out species and so forth. And so, yeah, I mean, it seems to be pretty elaborate to say all humans are going to die. We've been around for a while. We've been around for, in our current form, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, something close to what we are now. We're here for a small slice of that time. We've seen a lot of technological progress over the last several hundred years. It seems to me pretty remarkable. I mean, if you go stop someone on the street and tell them the world's going to end versus the world's going to continue, I think the world's going to end is a lot more surprising, and that would stimulate a lot more thought of something very unusual happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a couple responses to that. So one is we're basically playing what Eliezer calls reference class tennis, right? Where you're saying your reference class is like, look at economic growth. It's kind of like a train. It would be elaborate to say that the train is going to stop. But I can give you other reference classes. Like if you just zoom out, it's like, okay, we're a type of life form. Life forms have almost gone completely extinct 6 times in Earth's history. So wouldn't you just extrapolate that we're about to hit one of those extinctions or near extinctions?
Well, about to. I mean, it's doing a lot of work 6 times over billions of years of life. We'd still have very small odds, but the idea that it could happen at some point is not crazy. Yeah.
That is a good point that you're saying, like, if you just naively look at the timeline, why would it be now instead of in a couple hundred years? But if once you start seeing a bunch of smoke, be like, oh, well, this is consistent with the extinction being soon, knowing that there's going to be an extinction sometime.
Has AI killed anyone yet? I mean, has it taken over a country? Has it kind of like ISIS? It pops up in one village, it takes over, and then what the smoke is? It's very intelligent. Yeah, I mean, ChatGPT is
okay. So
I wouldn't discount that.
Maybe this particular observation only takes us to having a high P doom in like a 200 million year time frame and not a 20-year time frame.
Yeah, I mean, like P doom over like hundreds of millions of years, whether it's AI, whether it's some pandemic, whether it's another meteor, whether it's an alien species showing up and vaporizing us. I mean, yeah, a lot can happen in hundreds of millions of years. It's not I'm not completely sanguine. No, we're going to be here forever, and there's some holy force like maintaining us. Sure, yeah, we could disappear.
Mm-hmm. So my larger point about reference class tennis is like, I get that it's like a very natural reference class to extrapolate, a million years of humanity or a few hundred years since the Industrial Revolution. But what about the reference class of major intelligence increases, right? Like the last time there was a major intelligence increase, it was us coming and dominating the other animals.
Yeah, right. So the reference class is another. Yeah, I mean, is that always what happens when there's more intelligent species? There's us dominating other animals, but chimps were a lot smarter than ants. Chimps didn't dominate ants. Maybe they ate them, but I think ants had more biomass total, and ants ate chips when when they died. And there's mosquitoes that probably killed a lot of chimps who were a lot less. They were a lot more intelligent than them. So, yeah, intelligence leads to domination and one species wiping out another. Um, yeah, I mean that's that's an inconsistent kind of. It's not at least not an absolute finding throughout human history or all the history of animal life.
Yeah, that's a fair point about chimps versus ants. Like, it does seem like even though chimps are smarter than ants, they still, have a niche in a way that humans don't exactly have a niche. It feels like the whole Earth is our niche these days. I will say the only intelligence increase that I consider comparable to humans coming on the scene is the intelligence increase from no life to natural selection driven life. And this actually gets to the definition of intelligence. People have different definitions for it. The definition that I find useful is optimization power, the ability to basically hit goals. Are you familiar with that at all?
I mean, it's from context. I think I can figure out what you're talking about.
Okay, great. Yeah. So from that definition, before you had life on Earth, you basically didn't have any kind of consequentialist dynamics, any kind of system where the engineering of the system was driven by the outcome that the system would get. The physics that were happening in the solar system before you kicked off evolution on Earth just didn't have that kind of consequentialist dynamic. You know what I'm saying?
Didn't have a consequentialist dynamically. Nothing mattered because nothing could feel anything or think. Is that what you're saying?
So not exactly, and I don't expect the viewers to follow this far, so let me explain it again. A consequentialist dynamic is one where the outcome is somehow driving what you're doing. The day-to-day operation or engineering of the system is driven by the ultimate outcome of it. And this describes what human engineers do, right? Like, if I'm trying to build something, I'm going to reason backwards to the actions I should take. So that's a consequentialist dynamic. And evolution is a consequentialist dynamic because if the genes are going to mutate one way and then persist into the next generation, the explanation for that, it's because of their function, right? It's because of that end state that they're going to help the organism reproduce better.
Okay, but I don't understand what you mean by like consequentialist. You mean what? It's something. It's a theological kind of. It moves towards a purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a teleological explanation.
You said when we had natural selection, that's when that started.
Yes. So the kind of structures that you would see in the solar system didn't have a good explanation in terms of, oh, they're like this because they drive a certain outcome until natural selection kicked off.
But why not? Why not? Like gravity and laws of physics are shaping the planets and the surface of the Earth in different ways. Why isn't that the same thing?
Because they're not driving you toward a narrow outcome. So, like, if you think about the space of possible outcomes, and then you think about a target that a priori just seems like a narrow target, and then you say, you know what? The systems that are going to emerge are ones that are going to hit that target because they're good at hitting that target. You couldn't really say that about the solar system before evolution started on Earth, where now you can say, okay, reproducing your genes, complicated machinery that achieves that goal is going to emerge.
I don't know. Solar system looks, on the scale of like narrow. It's narrow in the scale of the universe. So it's like you have this big thing, and then it's circled by these other things that are smaller, which are themselves. That seems kind of like the same thing, like what natural selection is driving towards, on a different scale. That's compared to like the Earth, and like the solar system is compared to the universe, much narrower, probably relative to the universe. The solar system is relative to the universe is I'm guessing narrower than a life form on Earth relative to the Earth. So yeah, I still don't get the difference.
I mean, that's a good pushback to my ontology, right? Because basically, to summarize, I'm claiming that there's this important way to look at the world, which is an optimizer is here. Like, the process of evolution by natural selection, that is an optimizer. It's going to get these machines that reproduce their genes. And you're saying, can't I just call the solar system an optimizer? Because what if it was just trying to make a bunch of planets around the sun? Isn't that optimization?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, yeah, so the difference, the reason why we're not as impressed by that optimization, one difference is just that if you perturb the initial conditions, you don't see the same resilience toward driving at the same target. So, like, if you didn't have the spinning gas to begin with, it's not like it would go make itself spin. Whereas with survival, that you can get organisms in a bunch of different niches, and they're all still tending toward that same complex machinery for reproduction.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of decided afterwards that like the thing we call life is important, where we can just decide, whatever the universe is going to do something. Like if you change the initial conditions, I don't know, there won't be this solar system, but there'll probably be something else spinning around something else and things expanding and things contracting and so forth. Yeah, I don't know. I don't, what's kind of, I think I kind of moved away from what was the larger point of this
Yeah. So
digression?
the larger point actually gets to the definition of intelligence. So I'm actually glad that you're really giving me a run for my money here in terms of being like, look, is my definition even useful? What if we can just throw it away and not have that definition? Because if it's not even a useful way of analyzing things, that would actually undermine a lot of what I'm scared of. Because if you say, like, what is Liron scared of? I'm actually scared of machines that come along that are much higher than humans on this dimension of optimization, which I consider synonymous to intelligence. If you don't, if for people who get into semantics, fine, throw away intelligence. Let's just talk about optimization, right? I'm scared of powerful optimization. And now you're basically saying, hey, look, what if you even have a concept that's not very coherent? And that would be one way to be like, oh, great, I can be less scared of doom.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So the idea is that natural selection is this breaking point. There's things that are kind of they're reproducing, they're fighting for resources, they're competing with one another. Humans ended up being very good at that. Although kind of, I don't know, like ants are kind of still in the running. E.O. Wilson used to talk about ants a lot. He used to talk about ants and humans like having the most biomass because just there's so many ants. They're everywhere. So the ants kind of succeeded. Yeah, to follow your train of thought, it's like, yeah, there's this natural selection, there's these things that reproduce, there's these things that compete, there's these things that grab resources. They see other things potentially as a threat, for the same reason as because they're doing what they themselves are doing. And so, the point is we're just kind of sitting here, sitting ducks for this thing that eventually will just like turn the universe into paper clips or turn the universe into whatever it wants because it's just going to be very, very good at optimization. Right.
Right. And I still want to get back to, I know it's a little bit in the weeds, but I think these are good weeds
Yeah,
that I
yeah, no,
actually
this is fun. This is fun.
consider a staple of the argument. So you asked a good question. Like you're still pushing back on like, are you sure I shouldn't be impressed by these orbiting planets, given that when I look at life forms, sometimes they're actually not that great, right? Like pandas don't seem that good at reproducing. So, and the argument that you're saying, this actually gets to William Paley's famous watchmaker analogy. So my claim is you really should be more impressed by the amount of optimization that a life form is doing compared to a planet. The same way that if you arrive on some island that looks uninhabited, but then you reach into the sand and you pick up a pocket watch, and let's say you've never even seen a pocket watch, and it's like 1,000 years ago, so there's not that much technology around.
Mm.
But you see the watch, you look at it, and you're like, okay, I don't think that this is like made out of the same kind of physical process that made like the rocks nearby. It seems like something was fundamentally different about the kind of process that ends up with a watch, even different than the kind of process that ends up with an orbiting planet. Does that intuitively make sense?
Yes, yeah, but I mean, people so kind of, yeah, that makes intuitive sense that if you see a watch, it's not the same process that makes a planet. I don't know. I mean, the planets are pretty. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, the moons. I mean, they each have their own environment. They each have their own atmosphere. They don't have life for besides as far as we know, besides ours. But I don't know. Like Jupiter is very, very cool. Like with all these storms and all this.
Okay, so I think this is the key difference is when you look at a planet, you can just imagine that it would still be cool if you varied a bunch of its parameters, whereas the watch is just more sensitive. Like it just looked like somebody really dialed in a ton of parameters to get that watch to be a watch.
Mm. Yeah, and so humans are more optimized for I don't know, like if humans were twice as tall or half as tall, if Jupiter was twice as large or had like more, different kinds of gases or something. Um, yeah, I mean, what do we do? Is it just kind of like the system like complexity of like the immune system, right, or the brain? Like these are kind of very amazing
Exactly.
things. And
It's more impressive to look at the immune system compared to looking at a planet from that optimization dimension.
yeah, from the optimization dimension. Okay. Yeah, I guess, but like it's because we care about it. It's because I mean, is it because we care about the immune system? I mean, because it relates to us, and we're like, wow, isn't this lucky that this thing exists to keep us healthy? Because it's like Jupiter. I mean, Jupiter's bigger. There's bigger. It's kind of like, what are you impressed by? Like people like Monster Truck Ollies, like the fact that it's huge. The sun, like a black hole, like that's pretty amazing. And it's like maybe it like I don't know if you explained everything that went into a black hole, maybe it's more. Maybe the explanation would be shorter than if you explain like in detail how the immune system works. Maybe is that
I mean,
planet?
I think you're approaching the kind of, I mean, because there is math around this, right? We can quantify how impressed we should be at how narrow a target some system is hitting. So in the case of Jupiter, like you've mentioned, basically like it's big, it's colorful, it orbits the sun. But there's a lot of matter configurations that satisfy those criteria compared to like, okay, tells time accurately.
Yeah, tells time accurately is one thing, but like keeping things reproducing and alive, there's a lot of ways you can imagine that happening, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of tough to persist a complex matter configuration for lots of generations
Yeah.
the way life forms are doing.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say I accept your premise that
Okay, sure. And by the way, I mean this argument, people historically found it convincing enough that it used to be a big argument for creationism, right? Like the watchmaker analogy, it's like, look, you look at a fox, right? There's clearly design in that fox. And the funny thing is they were actually correct to notice that there is actually something fundamentally different about the having an animal exist. Like there is clearly a fundamentally different process to get to the animal as to get to the rocks and stuff. So they were correct to make that observation. And then Darwin had to come along and be like, so it turns out that there's this other consequentialist process that isn't a mind, and it's called evolution by natural selection.
yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, great. So then, so unwinding the discussion here, right? So we were talking about like reference classes. So for me, it was a huge jump in consequentialist optimization when suddenly Earth was populated all over the place, right? Spreading to all the niches in the Earth, these life forms that were highly optimized and continuing to optimize, the search space of genetic optimization, right? Natural selection is like searching for these local optima, like what are the best genes to get us to reproduce? And you got these amazing forms that really kind of conquered the Earth in a sense.
Okay. I'm still with you.
Right. And then now humans came along, and from my perspective, we're very much conquering evolution by natural selection. Like, the genes, if they had their way, they'd be like, oh, you guys should love sperm banks, like, spreading yourselves as best as you can. That's the greatest thing. And having different animals in their niches, like, that's how it has to be. And we're like, no, we're just actually going to take out a blank sheet of paper, describe how we want to engineer things, and then reason how to make it happen. So that's like a very transformative shift due to higher optimization power.
Is that what human beings are doing? I mean, because we're kind of another way to look at it is we're just kind of defective, and are we gaining more? We're gaining more control, like some cosmic sense over our environment, but like our numbers are going to start shrinking soon. We're not reproducing as much. And so are we just kind of like, what is kind of the fact that we can quote unquote want to do something that's different from what our genes, that happens a lot in nature. Like the panda is like, you could say that it's in the zoo, it doesn't want to breed. It's facing an existential crisis. It's writing its own script and saying, I don't want to be part of this, right? We're not like actually sitting down and centrally planning all that much. We have these institutions and governments and economies and our evolutionary nature, and just like stuff is happening.
Yeah, so once again, you're definitely forcing me to clarify exactly what I'm claiming here. So maybe I'll claim that if you want to predict how the future is going to play out, the ball is now in our court. Like you pretty much just need to ask yourself, okay, what are all of these groups of human brains going to reason themselves into doing, as opposed to being like, oh, which genes are going to evolve next?
I still think the genes evolving are pretty. I mean, it depends if if the timelines are wrong, and like we continue for another 1,000 years. I think what the genes do, and kind of, some of it will be maybe conscious embryo selection and genetic engineering and so forth. I think that's pretty important. I think it's pretty important what we're selecting for over the next 1,000 years.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So just, I mean, I think that we've covered this pretty well. And then obviously my extrapolation is that, hey, we're building these minds now that they don't even have genes. They can also improve themselves, potentially recursively. So just to play out my reference class, right? My reference class is, if you want to ask what happens in the future, you can basically just compress. It kind of screens off from a Bayesian reasoning perspective. You can just compress the question of what happens in the future into the question of what do these superhuman minds decide to do?
Yeah, and your only reference class though is humans, right? Because you see the chimp versus the ant, and the chimp is not that much successful. The ant, even though it's a lot more intelligent.
So yeah, I mean, when I look at humans, that to me is the only time there's been a truly discontinuous jump. Oh, actually, sorry, there was another one. So animal brains were a pretty discontinuous jump compared to other organisms. Although, if you look at how plants move around, they do it really slowly, but they're pretty complex. But animal brains, you can't really deny that was like a significant power jump. But the thing about humans is that gets to the concept of like general intelligence, where we've really kind of we've now deprecated this idea that you need to have an ecological niche at this point.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's right.
So one more thing I wanted to pick up from before is when we were talking about being elaborate. From my perspective, building AI is like building something that's as hard to get right as a rocket. SpaceX's Starship, I think, just exploded on the pad during a static fire test, and these guys have been building rockets for a while. So it's a hard problem, right? You have to load a bunch of fuel in the rocket. You could steer the rocket to the wrong place. You could accidentally fail to contain the fuel. So when I think about building AI, I think about that kind of volatile problem where, like, yes, it's probably possible, but it's certainly not easy. And so when I think about which outcome is elaborate, in my mind, getting it right is elaborate.
Getting the alignment problem right is
Right, exactly. Getting a thriving future compared to the equivalent of the Starship exploding on the pad is elaborate in my mind.
yeah, because things can go wrong. I mean, but that's true with any technology, right? It's like technologies will change the world. Therefore, it might be elaborate to think we're going to get it right, but we usually do get it right because, well, why? Why do we get it right? Is a good question. I mean,
The iterations, right? The fact that you get to mess up, try again, stuff, try again, right? You get to sit in your lab and keep tinkering.
well, it's not like airplane. I mean, airplanes were like, it's not like they just like killed a bunch of people. I mean, they did, but it wasn't, that bad. Yeah, I mean, yeah. And so the argument is you have this one chance because this thing is going to be so intelligent. And yeah, the alignment, okay. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, I get the reasoning here. Um, can we talk about what you want to talk about the alignment issue, like why you think it's actually hard, because why it's not the simple case of, why isn't ChatGPT already an aligned? Let's go back to that. Why isn't that already an aligned superintelligence?
So yeah, ChatGPT is good at chatting with you well. Of course, we see cracks in the armor, right? Like there's the recent story where somebody was like going insane, and he was saying like, I think I just heard the quote was something like, "Hey, if I were to like jump off a big building but think really hard and really believe in myself that I could fly, then could I?" And it gave it kind of like the sycophantic response, like, "Well, if you truly, some way to like amplify what he was saying." And that is like not what OpenAI would have wanted. But I will say, let's say 99% of the time, they've kind of beat it into shape. So I'll give you that much. And I think it's great. I mean, it makes the current product useful. The fundamental problem is very simply, they're just not super intelligent yet, right? So we're having a really great time on net below this threshold. I should clarify what my threshold is, right? My threshold is they become superhuman optimizers. So right now, if GPT starts to mess with me, I can still do an end run, right? I can finagle getting it shut down. Like I still have a little bit more power. I just don't think that situation is going to last long.
Okay, so I mean but that's so the idea is that ChatGPT is not that intelligent. Now it is. Like if someone told you is there's a person who can in 1 second take the LSAT or the GRE or medical exam and any one of these tests and get a very high score or a perfect score and beat like the greatest, chess master at chess and analyze a spreadsheet in a second and draw a picture, like, fractions of a second, you would say, wow, that's an intelligent person. That's an amazing, remarkable human being. Now, I know what you're saying in the sense that it's not intelligent. Dwarkesh Patel said, at one point that, it's weird that it like has all this information, but it's not making all these new scientific discoveries all the time because a human who had memorized that much information would be making connections that ChatGPT is not, or maybe I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it's just not, maybe the prompt hasn't been right or whatever. But yeah, it's not kind of,
Yeah.
and so it is kind of like super intelligent. Like, so maybe this is like this concept of intelligence is kind of, it's iffy because like, yeah, like on one scale, like one definition, which seems reasonable. I mean, it's 100 out of 100. And on another scale, it's like, 10 out of 100. And like, are we going to get to that point where it's like on the scale me and you are thinking of like creative thinking or making new scientific discoveries? If we haven't made a lot of progress there, then that indicates that maybe it's going to be a while here.
So that Dorkesh quote about like, oh, why does it have all this knowledge, but it's not making new connections? I think it's a good food for thought, but ultimately I just classify it as like yet another statement where people think that they've drawn a firewall between like things that AI is able to do today and things that it fundamentally can't. For me, it's very continuous. It's, you know, it's as if you tried to draw a firewall of like, oh, well, fingers trip it up. Remember, like they couldn't draw the fingers and now they're drawing the fingers fine, right? Fingers on your hand, like 6 fingers. So for me, it's like, is it really not making new connections? Because like when I'm asking it for help with my specific problems, it's certainly giving me answers that are tailored to me in a way that nobody's ever tailored the answer like that before, right? So that's my personal experience. And we have reports from scientists being like, I'm doing novel research and I'm using the AI and it's helping me with novel research. So, you know, I don't think Dwarkesh is totally wrong, but I think he's making the same kind of claim that people often make of like, okay, the current state of AI is it's not fantastic at this other skill yet.
It's not that firewalls is the right way to think about it. It's kind of spiky intelligence is the way to think about it. Like it's an LLM fundamentally, and it can do some things really, really well. And even, make pictures well. And, that's kind of amazing. Uh, but still, there's like a lot, the universe is, it's got a lot of data and it could trade and it can make pictures and it can produce text. Right. And those are things that
So that's another kind of argument. It's kind of an essentialist argument. Like at the end of the day, it's an LLM. So that's the firewall. Is if the problem somehow doesn't have to do with like outputting the next token based on your training data, then we're safe.
Yeah, but it's not a firewall. I mean, it could be like, text is a lot. Text is like how we communicate the things we know, although a lot of the knowledge that we have is kind of not, it's not explicit. It's not written down anywhere, like how to manufacture semiconductors and so forth. And so, yeah, there's just things that, it's just like any tool. There's things that are, it's very, very good. It's not like the case that every single thing that people said AI couldn't do. There's a lot of these things like, play Go or whatever, beat someone. But like, we're still waiting for like robots. Like there's things it can't do, like it can't walk around and shake a hand and walk around a party like a normal person. So there's a lot of things that are kind of basic, like even a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old can do, that AI still can't do. And there's things that like people said it would never do now that it can do. So there's not like a general lesson of like, it always ends up doing everything. That's not necessarily what we found.
I think, yeah, well, the firewall question to me is very interesting. So let me ask it to you this way. What do you think is the least impressive thing that it still won't be able to do 2 years from now?
Least impressive thing. Walk like a toddler. Can AI do that?
You definitely have robots that are walking and maintaining their balance. So I feel like that one is probably checked off today.
Okay. Okay. What's the most impressive thing that it won't be able to do 2 years from now, or the least impressive thing it won't be able to do 2 years from now? Okay,
Exactly, right? And that's kind of a way to interpret the firewall question, right? Of something that you can confidently say, even 2 years from now, this seems like it should be easy, and yet they still won't be able to do it.
Well, here's something that comes to mind. It's not necessarily easy, but it's like one thing. So like it can produce. I just think about this comes to mind because I think about it because of the nature of what I do. So AI can produce slop content. If I wanted to like just have like a kind of like a really stupid influencer account, I could go to AI and I could produce like pictures and words that I've wanted to do this experiment, just like have like a fake Twitter account and just have a bunch of AI and make it write a bunch of stuff. And I think some people are doing this. I've seen stuff go viral recently that looks AI generated, that looks completely stupid, but they're playing to a pretty dumb audience. They're playing to an audience of dumb humans. Now, could there be an AI Scott Alexander? Could there be me? Could be somebody who appeals to smart people and is like engaging ideas in a real way, and like kind of can socially navigate because it always requires some kind of social navigation. I'd be impressed if I would be impressed. Obviously I would be out of a job in 2 years. No, I wouldn't be because I still have like a loyal audience. But future people like me would be out of a job in a few years if an AI was able to do that. Could AI? Let's see here. Could I just say, walk over there and hand me my phone, right? Like that's kind of, it probably can understand the concept. It can see the phone. It's still just the basic kind of mechanics of moving the human body that every human can do. Apparently can't do. I don't know if it's that good of a, it's like these people who fall for it, like, people fall in love with like the Eiffel Tower. People get married to like objects. It's like people are kind of stupid, right?
Right.
And so like,
okay. So you got 2 ideas here, right? You said first of all there could be like an AI Scott Alexander character, where there's a new character who's like the next Scott Alexander.
Yeah.
They are writing really good posts. They've got a following, and nobody's totally sure if they're real.
Yeah,
Kind of like Gordon, although now Gordon came out as real.
If they're idiots, I believe you could do that already. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, and there's like famous like AI Instagram accounts, so certainly like visually they seem to be like
Hot
generating
girls
enough
and so
slop.
forth. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so and then in the home, I think a classic challenge is like, okay, can you just handle my dishwashing, right? So like load the dishwasher, scrub off the dirt, dry it. That's plausibly too hard for 2 years, but it's quite impressive.
To do the dishes?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on your perspective, right? Humans would say no because our reference point is everyone we know can do that. While for maybe in the grand scheme of the universe, yeah, it is impressive. So yeah, it really just depends on perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, the larger perspective here is just we're just asking at what point do the AIs just conclusively surpass humanity's power? Where suddenly, if you want to know what happens next, you don't really need to bother asking the humans.
Yeah, you don't need. I don't. Yeah, that's the question. And so you need to imagine, like, assuming that all these mechanics things, like AI can pick up a gun and shoot you or something. Like, imagine we don't get to that point. AI has to. Well, what would it have to be? Maybe it has to produce text and images, and then somehow manipulate humans enough. And that's I think is hard. I mean, that thing is hard. Like people talk about AI and like psyop campaigns and stuff. An AI psyop campaign that like changed public opinion, I think would be impressive. Like it would, like not the goal, even the goals if they weren't set by AI, but it had to like kind of understand social dynamics in a very fundamental way. Like I look at like political science, like how good we are at like forecasting this stuff. It just might be, chaos theory. This stuff is like too hard to really to forecast. And I haven't seen evidence yet that AI can. No, I know there's studies like you go to Reddit, it could produce like, it could produce like Reddit, like normal kind of content and it could change people's minds. Sure. The question is, can you do it? Like, can you reach the people that are most important? Kind of figure out who's most important, how to reach them, foresee the consequences. Like your propaganda campaign doesn't cause a backlash, and it doesn't cause some unintended consequences that you haven't figured out, and so forth. Even better than like a really group of really smart humans, some intelligence officers. Yeah, I don't know if AI will be able to do that.
Okay, yeah. So to summarize the question, we're talking about like potential firewalls or things that make you feel confident that humanity is still going to have an edge for 2 or more years. And
Yeah.
you're
So
basically saying like coordinating large groups of humans maybe is going to be a lasting edge.
if they don't get the thing, if they can't physically do stuff to us, they're going to have to psychologically manipulate us very, very well. That's like the way to do it. Or I guess it could be like they could offer, I guess they could like bribe us or something, right? They could go to people and be like, I'm going to give you like 1,000,000 Bitcoin
Right.
if you,
But do you feel like their inability to physically manipulate us, is that like a source of confidence for you?
yeah, because like I can just like smash the computer. I mean,
Right, right. But I'm saying, but if you extrapolate out 2 or even 5 to 10 years, let's even go 10 years, right? It's such a long time in AI development trajectory. I mean, I personally feel like in 10 years, the software is going to be so good. Like if you look at why aren't robots like Terminator status today, I actually think that the answer is mostly software. Like the kind of Boston Dynamics or like the humanoid-ish robots,
no.
they have enough like quality servos in them. I think it's mostly just software. Like they're much more slow in plotting compared to a biological organism. I think that gap is going to be closed within a single digit number of years.
Mm. Software is slow compared to a human I mean, it depends on the software, right? Some things can figure out things very fast, but yeah, so you think it's gonna close and then
Yeah, yeah, it's going to feel organic, right? Like when you interact with like a robot horse, like it really is going to feel like it's going to have like the agility of a horse. Like maybe the cells of the horse are still kind of more flexible, but it's going to have like more power in the motors, and it's still going to be like incredibly responsive.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Okay. And so the question for humans is kind of, are we going to get to a point where we have a misalignment and AI is kind of able to manipulate us, or able to kind of just without figuring out, I mean, if they figure out the robotics thing, if they can just make nano whatever technology, they can make little robots or whatever, and they can just do their bidding. That's one thing. The other thing is like, well, the question is, can they beat humans in this like kind of goal oriented uh, quest for like domination, right? Like, is that, and like I know the Eliza position is like that's just kind of, that's just going to come along with whatever your goals are. Um, I'm not sure if that's right. Yeah.
So just to add some high level structure here, right? When I talk about AI doom, you can divide it into two sub arguments. It's like, can the AIs kill everybody, and then will they? And I kind of want to focus a little bit more on can they, right? And that's why I asked like the firewall question of like, is there any particular thing that they won't be able to do much more powerfully than the human species can?
Is there anything they won't be able to do much more powerful than yeah, I mean, like manipulate other human beings and move things around in the physical world. That I think is the key.
Okay, so even with like even with 1,000 years of engineering, I mean, I want to see, ask you hypothetically here, right? It's a little bit of a tangential, but with 1,000 years of engineering, you still think the human body is going to be like a more powerful
I mean,
manipulator than an AI body?
there's nothing guaranteed of 1,000 years down the line. Yeah, I guess anything is possible. I wouldn't be able to forecast. Kind of well, what's
So you think 10 years from now, if it's like a one-on-one grappling match, you versus like the best humanoid, you think you'd win?
You're saying in how many years?
10 years.
I mean, probably. I mean, I don't know. Like the Boston Dynamics robot, maybe it could beat me. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I see it looks pretty impressive, but I could like, yeah. I mean, the grappling match, like, like a grappling. I mean, you could have it like grappling, but like do a bunch of like different chores around the house. Um, yeah, I think I could probably beat it in 5, 10 years.
So if it and you are occupying the same house
And like we
and
have
you
to
guys
clean
end
our
up
rooms.
getting a new castle, you just feel confident about your ability to use your human body to take it down.
To take it. I don't know about take it down. Like fight. Like I think I would be better at like cleaning or something or like cooking.
Even in 10 years, with 10 years of
Yeah, I
software
mean, why
advancement,
not?
because it is getting a lot smoother.
I mean, look, it can't do. I mean, what can it do? Like, where are the robots in our daily lives right now? Like, if you have a kid, if you have nannies, if you have gardeners, you're not seeing much automation. You're not seeing much in the way of that yet. I'm sure in
Okay.
factories, they figure something out and they probably have seen some impressive, but still, like the kind of range of what humans can do. Yeah, it doesn't seem like we've gotten close to that. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm not following technical developments in the field, but yeah, from my intuition, it doesn't seem shocking that I'd still be able to beat it in 10 or 20 or even 30 years.
Do you think it's more likely that the robot will win or that you will win? There's a
I think I would.
probability. Interesting. Okay, well, I guess that's a significant disagreement. Like you're not as ready as I am to just extrapolate progress to be like, yeah, it seems like in a few years the robots will just be better at
Yeah, I
navigating the
mean,
physical
because
world.
progress stalls out, like the flights. Like, look at the speed of flights. Like, there are a lot of things where it's things get better and then they kind of level off. That's pretty normal. Not everything extrapolates, forever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the analogy is a little bit strained, right? Because when the speed of flights, they found like a cost optimal amount to fly, so it wasn't really a technology stalling necessarily. But I see what you're saying. Like, look, what you're saying is plausible. Like that, we can put a pin in that. Like that is a way. If you told me for sure that AIs would be like physically impotent, right? They basically have to only have kind of like these robots that can only limp along. They can't do that much, and we can like shoot a gun at them and they'll go away. That would be nice. But then that also gets me to the next question, though, of hypothetically, with sufficient intelligence, do you think that an AI purely in a data center or in millions of data centers around the world, do you think that a giant supermind like that could take over the world without robotic actuators?
Uh, could a could a thing with sufficient intelligence, that's just software, take over the world? Um, yeah, I mean, I think it could. Yeah, it could. Yeah, sure, they could. Um,
Oh, great.
it would
Okay.
have to have a lot of, but the spiky intelligence problem it would have to be solved. It would have to be as good at manipulating human beings and understanding social dynamics and so forth. Then it's got to have, that the question of kind of will and whether it will try to do that is kind of a separate question. But I mean, theoretically, yeah. You have to accept that.
If you extrapolate your subjective experience of AI progress, roughly what do you think is like a number of years after which you could be like, yeah, I feel like this mind in the data center is probably more powerful than humanity?
Um, I'm sorry. What year do I think that will happen?
Yeah, like, because do you feel like in 1,000 years we'll have like a digital mind that's more powerful than humanity by living in a data
More
center?
powerful than humanity. I mean, it's like different. Like again, it's like ChatGPT is already more powerful than humanity in many ways. Even like all the humans working together could not beat ChatGPT on many tasks or do something as quickly as as it does it. So, like we're kind of there, and so it's going to be it's not just going to be like
Well, yeah, let me correct the definition though, right? So ChatGPT, if one day somebody put in the system prompt, right? I got root access to OpenAI and I put in the system prompt, take over the world.
Mhm.
You say that it can do it, but I disagree. I don't think we're at can yet. I think once we get at can, I also
No,
think
I
we're
don't
going to get
think
to
it
will, which
can,
we
right.
haven't talked much about yet, but I don't think we're at can.
Yeah, no, I don't think I wouldn't say we're at can. We're at super intelligence in a way. That's where we're at, and that doesn't.
Sure, in a way, right? But not in the way that I think is scary.
Yeah, and so like you need for that you need evidence that we're moving towards that scary thing, and is ChatGPT evidence because like you have to start seeing some real, and maybe Eliza would say by the time you see the evidence it's too late. I mean maybe that's the answer, um, but like at this point I don't see kind of that goal oriented power seeking behavior. I mean you have a lot of intelligence or things that look like intelligence without that, and
Right.
so like
So
and the
just to
people
structure,
that.
let me structure the how I'm asking the questions. All right. So I think you've agreed that a supermind living in a million data centers with a ton of computational resources, if it really was a supermind, then that would be dangerous, right? Even without robots, like it probably would get the best of humanity in that hypothetical scenario, correct?
Yeah, I mean, with you get into complicated questions of like goals and will, but assuming that away,
If it wanted to, yeah. So
yeah, for one.
let's say it wanted to.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, and then so my next question was just this kind of supermind scenario. I mean, you're raising points now about like, well, are we getting close to the supermind? I'm just curious, like, do you think that there's like a significant chance that we'll have such a supermind in the next decade or two?
But the supermind is what? The definition is something that is um, smarter than us on every dimension, smarter than a typical,
Yeah, and
smarter than
let's so for me,
so. Yeah,
so remember my hack is, the semantics of intelligence. I'm happy to sidestep all those semantics because and just tell you that what I find scary and what I find to be super about that kind of supermind is the optimization power definition. So a mind that when given any goal, it can just steer toward that goal better than a human could.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of. Yeah, when given a goal, it can because it can kind of iterate over and over again, and it can do trial and error and so forth. It can kind of learn. It can teach. It can teach itself. Yeah, I mean, you've got to. Yeah, okay. So that can be. I mean, that potentially could be an issue, obviously, right? And the question is kind of, do we see the indication? I'm not ruling it out. I mean, theoretically, um, it's possible.
Yeah, how close do you think we are to that kind of super? Because the thing is, a lot of the AI companies, right? If you just listen to them, you'd think they might be the authorities having taken us this far. They themselves are predicting like 3 years.
Well, I mean, people, people in industries always say stuff. And I remember 2022 actually, just going back to like your kind of recent history. And I remember was it 2022 when ChatGPT came out and it was started to get really good? Was that ChatGPT? Was that ChatGPT 3? Um,
Yeah,
and people were saying, on Twitter, maybe they're not the most like, oh my God, like the 2024 election is going to be like some weird stuff is going to happen. The 2024 election, it's all going to be about AI. It's all we're going to be thinking about. And it's going to be like the main issue. And now, we went through the 2024 election. Now we're in 2025 and AI is more impressive. And maybe you say, well, that's just not enough time. It's got to be the 2028 election. I don't know. If we go two more elections and it's still like AI is not one of the
yeah,
top
I hear you.
5 or 10 issues, then I think people like you will have to rethink things.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I guess the way I'd ask the question is this. Okay, so if you give progress another decade, isn't there like at least a 25% chance that we'll get to the optimizer supermind?
Um, I mean, like, you could have said, right after nuclear weapons were developed, you could have said, give it 10 more years. And there was political stuff here that actually prevented them from going further. There was the hydrogen bomb and so forth. So maybe that's not the best example, but I don't know. You could have, I mean, there's a lot of things where like you see a big spike and then it kind of levels off. So like
Mhm.
human health, like life expectancy, like, just all kinds of
Right.
things.
Yeah, I agree. The answer might be no. Right?
The
Like I'm
answer might
saying,
be no,
isn't there a
but
25%
25%
chance?
no. Like, I think that the base of, like now going to the base rate of, like, did some amazing thing that just happened and just had a line shoot up. Is it good? Like Nvidia stock, like,
Mhm.
is the odds that it's gonna go up like it's got up before, is that 25? That's not 25%. It's probably 50% that it'll be higher and 50% that'll be lower, like all stocks are, right? And like, I think AI progress won't go backwards like the Nvidia stock might, but it's probably going to be, you could imagine it being a normal rate of change. You have a couple things. You have the thing of like AI can build upon itself. You have this self improvement that's possible, that like AI can help you fix AI. But there's also the possibility, like there's reasons why it might plateau, because you've run out of training data, or because you've made the breakthrough,
Exactly.
or whatever. We've reached some kind of limit of like what you can train the data on based on what we have.
Exactly. So there's a certain pattern matching outside view that you're bringing up, which is saying, look, we might be in an S curve that plateaus out below the human optimization level, right? We could be in that scenario. I agree, we could be, but how are you getting more than 75% chance on that?
Like if you told me that ChatGPT was invented this morning, like between 3 and 4, to me it's kind of strange. It's kind of strange where we are right now. We're in a place where like ChatGPT can, maybe this is worth fleshing out more. We're at a place where ChatGPT can write an article of like any college, in any college course, but it cannot be one of the best columnists in the world. And that is bizarre. That is bizarre, because you would think on the grand scale of humanity, like Scott Alexander or like Andrew Sullivan or something, versus like a college student who gets an A, that's not that big of a gap. Like you think you would get to one in the morning, you think you'd get to the other in afternoon, or 6 months or a year. The fact that we've been there for like 3 years, to me, that's odd. Do you find that strange?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, so I agree that things aren't, I couldn't have told you which things are going to come online when, right?
No,
And
but why are we
like
stuck in
even
this
when I
place?
saw,
Why are we
yeah,
stuck right here? And the answer might be training data. There's not a lot of people who write as well as Scott Alexander or Andrew Sullivan or whatever, and there's a lot of people who produce work that get you an A in an English lit class. That could
well,
potentially be the
what
answer.
is your personal probability to take this example though, right? What is your personal probability that you can't that nobody will expose that one of the top columnists in the nation was an AI in just 2 years from now? Like, are you that certain that we're not going to get there? I mean, I agree, it's possible.
Well, I mean, it's kind of weird because the people grow as columnists because like people know them,
Sure,
and
sure.
it is, so somebody could
Okay, well,
become a
I mean,
columnist.
okay, it
Yeah.
gets back to the next Scott Alexander question, right? So going back to that, I mean, it seems like you were willing to be pretty uncertain, right, about whether we're about to get the next Scott Alexander or not, right? Like it could go either way, but it sounds like you get more certain when when we're talking about, I don't know, the olive capabilities. Like you think some capabilities are going to hold out.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just, I'm trying to kind of understand what we have here with this kind of example. We've plateaued. It would be like, okay, we invented the thing. We invented a robot that could place bronze in the Olympics, but for
Hmm.
3 years did
Right,
not
right,
get
right.
gold. And like the difference between gold and bronze, we thought was like a fraction of a second. And so, like, yeah, you ask me, I'll bite the bullet then, and you say, well, what are the odds that one of the best columns in this country in 2 years will be AI? I would say very, very low.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting.
Because if
Okay,
you
so
were
back,
sitting
so
there at
even in that Scott
bronze,
Alexander question, you're like,
yeah.
there's not going to be like even though there's like Instagram influencers that have these huge audiences that have kind of already proven that they can be AI, it's just not going to happen with like writing intellectual work.
Yes, I mean, there's something different about that. Um, and yeah,
And obviously you are biased
I'm buyer.
to say something like
I
that,
saw Mark
but fair
Andreessen saying
enough.
like the venture capitalist is the one thing that AI might not bring. Like, shut up. Yeah, okay. How
Right.
could they get?
So,
Yeah, I don't want to be like that, but it is interesting because it's kind of closer to what we are, where it's like it's LLMs, it's
uh,
producing text, and like, yeah, we're stuck in a very weird spot. I don't get that. I think that needs to be kind of, yeah.
well, one thing I would note to that is like, yes, we're stuck in a very weird spot, but we haven't been stuck for long. And this a lot of the sub parts that we're stuck with get unstuck, right? So like somebody would have been like, "Oh, we're stuck in such a weird spot. I can draw these beautiful pictures, but it doesn't
Yeah.
fully understand your
Or
prompt."
you can
But
write,
now it's
or you can write
understanding my
like
prompt a hell of a lot more than before.
yeah,
Like, right? So it's like
yeah. You're right.
seems to
There
me
was a
like the
point.
train seems to be moving pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a point where you could write like a kindergartner, but it couldn't write like a college student. Like that was, we were
Right.
stuck there for a little while. So maybe that's not a good example. Maybe we just happen to be right there. Yeah, maybe.
I mean that I saw a tweet the other day which somebody's like, man, remember that Tim Urban picture, the one where it's like the train's coming and we want to watch it go through like human intelligence level, but the moment it comes, we like turn our heads, it's already like super intelligent, and everybody's like, Tim Urban is totally disproven. It's spending so much time being roughly human level intelligent. I'm like, so much time? Okay, 4 years, and then it's gone. That's not that much time.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Maybe it's not that much time. Maybe this intuition is wrong. I don't know.
All right, nice. So yeah, so zooming back out, so both of us have actually added structure to the entire what I call the doom train. And the metaphor of the doom train is you get on, there's a bunch of different arguments. We've covered a lot of them already. And every argument is kind of a chance to get off. It's like a stop on the doom train, or you can keep riding the doom train. You're like, no, I'm not getting off there. You get all the way to the end. And now you've accepted the argument of like, wow, there is actually a high P doom. Like this is not looking good. And that's where I am. I'm in Doomtown. I've ridden the train all the way to the end. But you've listed a bunch of stops where you get off in one of your posts. So let's go over Richard's doom train. Sound good?
Okay, yeah, this was a article a while ago, so you're gonna have to refresh my memory on what I wrote, but I'm sure you will.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'll refresh my mind. And obviously, the viewers are new to it. So, stop one on your train is to quote, there are massive diminishing returns to intelligence. So, a super AI being smarter than us is not going to have that much of an advantage. That's an opportunity to get off the doom train thinking there are massive diminishing returns to intelligence. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if you look at like people who have IQs of like 150 versus people of IQs of 100 or something, I mean, there's obviously like, a big difference there. But like being a human with an IQ of 100 is a lot better than being a human with an IQ of 50 or something or 30 or something, obviously, for your functioning. And, when you get a like 150 versus 170, I don't know if we say, the 170s aren't necessarily that much, but are often like if you look at things like, how happy they are, how long they live. There's obviously like with education, and income, your life expectancy goes up, but not, it eventually plateaus and, giving you more is not. So yeah, there could be something like this where it's like, until the world is complicated, you have this thing called intelligence. You can figure out little pieces of it. But like everything else is basically, most things are, you just have to like, the knowledge usually comes from like scientific testing, which is not just like pure sitting there and reasoning, but you've got to like think up experiments, do the experiments, have the infrastructure to do that, or you have to yeah, or you have to like have these like I mentioned earlier, these processes or these kind of ways of doing things that can't be or are at least are not usually articulated. Kind of just knowing how to do something is kind of how people end up doing stuff like playing basketball or something like that, or like some kind of manufacturing microchips or something like that. And so yeah, that's that argument that there's just no
Yeah,
no.
the people who get off the doom train here, it seems like they're imagining a scenario where we have arbitrarily many years of progress in AI, and at the end of it, you have a supermind, but the supermind is like barely a better entrepreneur than Elon Musk because there just wasn't that much headroom in the whole field of entrepreneurship than what and engineering than what you're getting with Elon Musk. Like we're already slamming up against the ceiling just by virtue of having a human brain. Isn't that what you'd have to believe?
Yeah, kind of. But like Elon Musk, like even if he was a much better entrepreneur, there's a lot of luck, obviously, and stuff. But yeah, even if he was a much better entrepreneur, um, is he going to, can he gain that much more power? He's a lot of power. He can buy Twitter. He can't like end the Russia-Ukraine war. There's a lot of things he can't do for humanity, and maybe there'd be like a better Elon Musk. But like what super Elon Musk could do, have more money, be better at politics, have more resources. Like, the question is whether that kind of levels off.
Right. So, from my perspective, an observation that I have just looking at human progress is that the universe itself is highly engineerable or hackable, if you prefer. The fact that we're able to make something like an iPhone or the computer we're talking on, the fact that that's physically possible and, a species of ape, humans, we're just able to put that together, that is quite a gift that the universe is giving us. And I just feel like there's a lot more gifts where that came from.
Yeah, I think that's right. But where do the gifts, I mean, where do the gifts come from? Do they come from just intelligence or do they come from like specific specialized knowledge and experience and, kind of like the slow process of like testing things and having scientific processes in the world and market dynamics and also, scientific fields and areas of study and peer review and all the kind of institutions that make, the world work. That's kind of the question. It's hackable, but like, what makes it hackable? Just purely intelligence or
Right.
like a bunch of different things?
I mean, I think what makes it hackable is just that it's kind of like simple, like it's made out of like simple building blocks. And sure, you get like chaos, but for the most part, you can just find these sandboxes or these like controlled environments where you can just put the blocks together, and it's pretty predictable. You kind of know what you're going to get, right? You can't a mission to Mars. It is doable. Like the radiation and the chaos, it's actually not. Once we tinker a little bit, right? It's not going to prevent us from going to Mars if we want to go to Mars bad enough. Going to Mars is a solvable problem in a way that it wouldn't be in like a messier universe.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, but it's gonna. I mean, again, you're gonna have to like figure out. Yeah, it is hackable. It is built of these components. Yeah, the question is how you figure out, like like how you have a medicine, like how you figure out something. Like you don't sit there and do that from first principles usually, or anything close to that. Usually just like it's serendipity, or it's like something happens, or you test a bunch of different things, and almost none of them work. And like in this case, it requires like humans and institutions and like, the kind of scientific record keeping and people like supply chains and things moving around, and like for humans to figure that out.
Mhm.
Whether AI can kind
Yeah.
of like figure that out on its own. Yeah, different question.
That's definitely something people point to, right? They're like, you could have a genius, but the genius is going to have to perform an experiment. I'm like, well, one man's empiricism is another man's thought experiment. Like Nikola Tesla famously was like, oh yeah, when I invent something, I just imagine it all in my head and then I write it down and it usually works.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is, I don't know how many, I mean, I don't know, like Tesla, that was pretty, yeah, that was, I don't know.
Einstein's theory of relativity, famously, he just took out a pencil and paper, right? No experiment there.
Yeah, he had the theory of relativity, but like the application, he couldn't think of any applications for it. Like now, all kinds of applications use the theory of relativity, but
Yeah,
to do
sure.
that
Okay.
was a big.
Well, it sounds like you're not that hardcore about this pushback of like, no, man, you just have to do a bunch of experiments. I think you're open to the idea of like, no, man, just thinking is going to get the job done.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I know. I think just thinking is probably not how you get the job done.
Okay. So, all right. So you're one of those, people who get off the doom train and that particular thing. You find that convincing.
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah,
All right.
because we're idiots. I mean,
Okay.
there's nothing. I mean, I know nothing from first principles. Nothing. Like all I know is like, I know like how to like drive a car. I couldn't describe it to you. The things I know. It's like because somebody somewhere did a test or something and wrote it and wrote down and I read about it or something. There's not much. There's just nothing. I mean, there's almost nothing I know from like first principles. None of my intuitions or common sense, I think, gets.
Yeah. So one observation is if you look at most of the things that humans accomplish through a lot of trial and error, in retrospect, it does seem to me like more intelligence would have solved it. Like one idea is something like, Edison's light bulb or Edison's phonograph. It's like, yeah, he did a lot of tinkering, but if you just understood material science really well, or in the case, even the phonograph seems like a simple concept in retrospect, or like Bell's telephone, like a lot of these things that are like crowning achievements of humanity, if you can just think really well, are these really that hard to realize that they would work?
I don't know. I mean, maybe your mind works, but much more efficiently than mine. To me,
I'm not talking about my own mind,
yeah.
right? But I'm just noticing that, like the way I'm modeling what's happening is we're doing a search, and our minds are limited, and so we have a handicap, right? We use the universe to help us search, the same way that like our visual memory is crap, and we don't really remember our peripheral vision, but it's okay because we just always glance at it, right? So we're using all these crutches, but the AI, it's just going to have megawatts of power. It's going to be well resourced. It's going to be a grown up mind.
Yeah, and the question is kind of, yeah, I don't know. Like like you read like Heinrich's like Secret of Our Success, and like how humans, every innovation is just like these bunch of little steps with like no author. Like maybe you're saying, oh well, if they were smart enough, they could have just figured out how to fish, or they could have figured out how to tell time or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't seem that plausible to me.
Okay, well, that's definitely a major point of disagreement. But moving on the doom train here. So, quoting you again, another stop is alignment will turn out to be a relatively trivial problem. Like, just tell the LLM to use some common sense, and it won't turn us into a ham sandwich when we ask it to make me a ham sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to that. I mean, there's yeah, I mean, like the alignment problem, it is with ChatGPT. Like, I don't fear it. Like, I just don't at a gut level. I do not fear it. It's completely docile and it's smarter than the.
Look, if we're talking gut level, by the way, I'm on the same page as you. Okay, so I've remarked before that, like, if you just look at my gut just thinks that we're living in the tech paradise and everything is great. So everything I'm telling you is entirely just my rational mind talking. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, but the logic of like this thing is actually smarter than you. I think that ChatGPT, I think if I came up with a definition of intelligence, 9 out of 10 of those definitions, ChatGPT is going to be smarter than me. I just think that's kind of intuitively, obviously correct, and it's aligned, right? And so like it could be me, but it's like it didn't go through this process of biological. It's just a bunch of it's just a bunch of circuits and code, and maybe like we are the designers, like we built like every line in that.
All right, that's a lot of different arguments coming out here.
Yeah, I mean, so it's like I don't know, like a lot, like do we have any Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Go ahead. You could respond to whatever that you want to take on.
I mean, I feel like it's the easiest one to respond to is like, we are its designers. I mean, for one thing, like we kind of stepped back and let it evolve itself, right? So there's a lot of black boxness to it.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of black boxes too, but there's not like there's new products popping up that we don't know about, or like that or maybe there are that like we're.
So I agree that aligning systems like the current ChatGPT is a problem that I don't consider doomy, right? I mean, even though it helped that guy potentially commit suicide, right? Like that's not that big a deal because the definition of intelligence, right? Like it's at the end of the day, they're not higher optimization power than the human species yet. They're on the brink of being that. That's why I'm trying to issue the warning. I'm saying that is the critical threshold.
Yeah, but why? Like, okay, like if you said there's like a band of savages that's going to take over the country, like you'd want to see evidence first. You'd want to see that like they took over a village or they took over a town. You'd want to see evidence first, and maybe you think it's going to be too late by the time we get evidence. Like AI took over, like Walmart was just like, you know what? We had this AI program and it took over the company, and we don't run our stores anymore. Gets rid of like,
Right.
let's
Okay, well, let me go back to the structure because we're derailing a little bit. So when you're saying alignment will turn out to be a relatively trivial problem, that claim is only interesting to me if you pre-assume that we're going to get an actually super intelligent, a superhuman optimizer, right? If you're saying, hey, you know what, we're not even going to get a superhuman optimizer, I'm like, great, well then I'll get off the doom train with you, right? If
Well,
we're
you only
talking
have
about
to get off the
alignment,
blue train one place, right? I don't know. I'm not confident in all.
yeah, and you only have to go off one place, right? But I think if we're even talking about whether alignment is easy or hard, in my mind, that's only an interesting question if you assume actual superintelligence.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking probabilities here, so I grant some probability of a super intelligence that I guess would meet any definition. Yeah, and then that becomes an interesting question, right? So I guess my point with the ChatGPT is we have a definition of super intelligence. It's alignable. That's maybe has lessons. Maybe the ChatGPT is not smarter. But what is it? I mean, the ChatGPT, but it is like it could just be like every time I talk to it, it could be like trying to figure out ways to make me go out and do something crazy. Like it could be doing that. It's not as far as we
Yeah.
can see, because they
Let
align.
me lay out my position here, but I'll let you finish if you want to keep going.
No, you can go ahead.
Yeah, let me lay out my position because I actually think this stop on the doom train is the most subtle. I've actually done a couple long episodes about it. One with Jim Babcock from the Less Wrong team, and one just me explaining stuff. I do actually think that it is tricky to explain how come ChatGPT seems like 99% good and useful and friendly, except for the suicide issue, but that's a minority. And why am I still warning that the super intelligent AI will go rogue on us, right? Like, where's the disconnect there? I think that's actually a somewhat subtle question. So let me lay out my position a little bit. I think there's going to be a time when the reinforcement learning type of AIs, those are going to run away because they're going to really just be good at hitting the exact targets that we set for them. So we're going to say, oh, I'm going to make an AI that's an agent that's like better at running a business, and it's going to be scored on like how much money it makes. There's going to be these more powerful reinforcement learning loops. Right now, they're just not powerful enough. They're just not at the superhuman threshold of general optimization. We're going to get there. We're going to max out all the variables. It's going to be it's going to have more power than a human, and it's going to have targets that are like real world targets, not just like make a chat line, but like do anything, make money, build something, like just any arbitrary targets in the real world. It's going to have a reinforcement learning type loop where it's like a black box that somehow achieves an outcome and gets reinforced for that. That's when things are going to run out of our control because it's going to get a really, really high score on our test, but our test won't be like the perfect test of how it should optimize the universe. And then it's going to go rogue and it's going to reshape the universe into a way that satisfies some test, but we'll be out of the picture at that point because we won't have like a good off button. Like we'll just have turned on this reinforcement learning process that runs out of our control.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple things here. So this is kind of like, first of all, like whether we're close to that, right? Like put a bunch of words on text versus like make a lot of money or take over. Those are very, very take over the world. Those are very, very different goals, right? So like, I think like take over the world as a goal. Like I don't think we've even taken the most tentative steps towards that, unless you want to kind of analogize the LLM towards that, right?
So yeah, in terms of types of goals, and by the way, I never even said take over the world has to be the goal. I just said we're increasing the goals. We're like right now, we already have agent AIs that are useful. Like there's agents that'll, programmers like, hey, I want you to do a bunch of check-ins to make my code base better. That's already happening, and that's like a little bit more powerful than just chatting. So there's this ladder, right, where the next thing could be like, hey, you know what? You control a robot, or you don't control a robot, but you've got a human with a headset who's listening to you. He's your employee. Go ahead and tell him what to do. You have 1 month, build me a house, right? So there's going to be these longer loops. where the AIs are going to get to train to just do more stuff. And the same kind of loop that makes them really good chatters, we're now learning how to generalize that, right? Generalizing them to the biology, mathematics, programming, soon real world stuff. Like we've kind of discovered the secret sauce of just like, as Ilya says, like, these models just want to learn. Like we just have the raw substance of brains that are about to surpass human brains. And I'm just saying that the loop, the way that we steer them is about to get out of control.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, again, like it's like plausible, but like you have to see it. Like you have to see like even like, the takeover like a company or something. You have to see it. Like even like the kind of the stock market should just go through the roof. I mean, the kind of the future earnings of these companies should just be like, insane, right? There should be
I think they will be.
yeah, there should be some stuff we should see that would like
I mean, OpenAI valued at 300 billion after a few years.
yeah, I mean, it's impressive. It's an impressive technology. I mean, is it like take over the world and do literally everything level, or like could do literally anything you ask? I think it would be much. I think it would have the biggest market cap. Where does it rank as far as like the biggest corporation in the world? I don't think it's close to that yet, right?
So to be clear, there's a few years worth of trend extrapolation here, right? If we're just talking about the present, I agree.
Yeah, but the market
We're fine.
takes into account, a few years of extrapolation. I mean, I think it's
Right. I mean, you're right that the S&P hasn't spiked that much yet. The only thing that's spiked is like startup valuations, OpenAI. Y Combinator is reporting now. I think that I forgot if they said 4x or 10x, but they're basically saying a Y Combinator batch compared to like 4 or 5 years ago is now like just printing 4x more money.
yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad to hear. I think that's a good sign.
Right. And that's the leading indicator, right?
Yeah.
Compared to the S&P.
Yeah, what is 4 times as much versus like what should we expect if it was like we were getting to that point? Yeah, I don't know. It's like kind of, is that a lot, or is that compared? That's a lot, but is it a lot relative to like thinking we're gonna get to doom? I don't know.
Gotcha. So let's go on to the next step. This one is actually alignment will turn out to be a relatively trivial problem, but you saw that as we discussed it, a lot of our discussions weren't just about alignment per se. It was like, what exactly is it that we even have to align, right? How will things play out? So, but that's fine. Let's just go to the next stop on the doom train here. So this is your doom train. So your next stop is you'd need to program in power-seeking behavior in order to get it. And then you also quote Steven Pinker saying, there is no law of complex systems that says that intelligent agents must turn into ruthless conquistadors. Indeed, we know of one highly advanced form of intelligence that evolved without this defect. They're called women. All right, so classic Pinkerism.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Like the more I like it because it's clever. I mean, intelligence. Like you would think, like everyone with an IQ of like one, the closest humans we have are not that much more. Again, are not that much more powerful because there's like these things don't seem that related. Now you'll say that, that kind of the ones that are best at kind of optimizing are the ones the subset of intelligent beings or programs or whatever, the ones that are most optimized towards power, the ones that are selected for power will kind of move in that direction. But we don't see it with humans. We see like a pretty kind of like, we see really smart people who are just like not, I guess they do better. I mean, maybe they do get better at getting resources, right? And maybe that's the kind of power. They're wealthy. They're more likely to be involved in higher levels of government. So maybe that is a kind of, yeah, maybe that's right. And I think that like, the idea that AI would be indifferent to us, I think is the problem. But then is it indifferent to us? Is it truly indifferent to us? Because like our, intelligent beings tend to think carefully. Maybe this is going to get to another one where we talked about kind of benevolence. So maybe that's like bleeding into the other objection. But yeah, I don't know what to make of that Pinker thing. Now that I think,
so I mean, I guess the question for you is right. Is do you imagine that when we have a bunch of smart AIs, they're all just going to be like very tame? Like you're not going to get a world dominated by AIs that are being very hardcore about
is very
achieving.
tame. Yeah, my computer right now is very tame. Like, they're not,
Yeah.
maybe there's something here. Maybe it's just our very unique biological circumstances and like, just kind of evolutionary pressures that made us like this. And maybe you could analogize that to what the LLMs are going through, whatever artificial intelligence is going through, but it might not be the same. It might be this kind of was a very specific kind of thing.
Okay, so I think it's obvious to everybody, you and I can agree that it's possible to have a really intelligent agent that's also really tame, that wants to shut off after a little bit. And a lot of women are like that, even a lot of men are like that, like a stoner just wants to live his life carefree. Okay, so that's clearly possible. But would you agree with me that it's more convergent to have the more power-seeking version? Because, and I'll tell you what I mean by convergent, when you have an agent that's kind of chill, only accomplishes goals a little bit, that agent will notice like, okay, yeah, I only slightly want to accomplish the next goal, but let me just kick off a sub agent and let's just have that sub agent just go get it, just real quick, just go get it, right? So there's kind of a tendency to be like, hey, if you actually want something done, there's a lot of incentive to be like, okay, well, why don't you just rewrite your code to just be a little more effective at getting the next thing done? And it doesn't go backwards. Like if you really want something done, you're not going to wake up one day and be like, you know what I should do? Make myself care less about actually driving outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, it could be,
The other sense in convergent, by the way, is competition, right? So if you have a bunch of successful, lazy AIs, that's fine, but who are the resources eventually going to go to, right? The ones that are just more hardcore.
yeah. I mean, but humans will also kind of, to the extent that they can see what's going on, snap back against it. So maybe being like the most aggressive AI might not be the best survival strategy. For the same reason, being the most aggressive human isn't always the best survival strategy.
And so now you're invoking like coalitional tribal dynamics, right? So this is like another level of analysis here.
Yeah, it's another potential issue. I mean, because you're existing in an environment, you're not just existing, evolving on your own in a vacuum. You're competing out there in the real world.
Right. Okay, so I mean, going back to your own phrase, I know it was a while ago, but you wrote, you need to program in power-seeking behavior in order to get it. So you know that term instrumental convergence? The point of that concept is just saying that if all you program is just like a feedback loop where you reward an outcome, and you get an agent that's good at driving an outcome, or what you might call an outcome optimizer, right? This is like a thing that seems like it's going to happen. We're going to reinforcement learn and get outcome optimizers that are superhuman. This seems like a pretty likely thing. So the insight of instrumental convergence is, okay, when you have a system like that, it's probably going to have inside the black box this instrumental belief that all of these sub-objectives are useful, like acquire money. That's pretty useful, just as a matter of pure logic, that like these things do actually help that outcome.
Yeah. No, that's true, but it's like there's also some things like in our nature, there's like get money, get power, get resources. But there's always these other things that are pushing back against that, right? Because there's like you have to get along with people. You have a moral sense that evolved for whatever reason, but seems to have its own autonomous power. And so yeah, the AIs will have that too, and they will have the fact that they didn't evolve under natural selection and they were made by humans, or maybe maybe two steps removed, whatever. Ultimately, made by humans with pro-social goals in mind, kind of putting their thumb on the scale every way. Always humans kind of look out for major problems, ready. We're not that efficient maybe at seeing dangers, but if they pop up, we can. We're pretty fast. I mean, look, I think if AI did it like a 9/11, like you should be hoping for AI doing a 9/11, like someone in your case, because, like that would get it shut down. If it killed 1,000 people, that would do it. And like why it doesn't.
Okay, but just to stay on this point though, right? Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it sounds like you do agree that instrumental convergence is like a useful observation, and in some sense it's like a convergent default. And then you're also saying, okay, but we'll put our thumb on the scale, so it doesn't have to happen.
Thinking about. Like you're saying that's the default. I don't know if it's default, but it's like it's worth thinking about. It makes sense. At the same time, like existing in an environment with other actors reacting to you is also, just as self-evidently true.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next stop on the doom train here. So looks like you got 5 more stops. So your next stop is AI will simply be benevolent. Perhaps there is some law in which there is an intimate connection between reason and morality. This is why humans are more moral than other animals, and the smartest humans in societies are more ethical than the dumber ones.
Yeah, I don't know how much I want to how much I have to contribute or to defend this. It's just like it's more of like a kind of a spiritual or kind of very high level philosophical point that I'm not sure there's a lot of empirical evidence we can argue for or against, but it's something that seems kind of right to me, but I don't know.
Well, past Richard put a 10% on it, so I think you consider this like a minority stop.
Yeah, well, yeah, 10%. Yeah, so I didn't think it was that strong of a view, but there's part of me that says it's whatever path. If you asked me today, I'd probably put a different number on it because whatever, I wrote this a few years ago. But yeah, 10% sounds approximately in the right ballpark, and I don't know, there could be something to it.
So that term orthogonality thesis, I think Nick Bostrom coined it, and it's the idea that higher intelligence and higher morality, you could have more of one, more of the other. They don't have to correspond, right? They're orthogonal.
Yeah, that's the alternative argument, sure.
And you're basically saying there's like at least a 10% chance that no, it's just false. Like they do correspond because smarter humans tend to care more.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a better person because I'm smart. I feel like I can think about like,
Yeah. So, in humans, I kind of agree because I think what happens is when you go to a lower IQ human, a lot of times they just can't keep in their head like what their moral obligation is supposed to be in context.
yeah, or not to care. I mean, it just doesn't even enter your mind, I think, in a lot of cases. Yeah.
That kind of correlation though, right? But you also then have like very, very smart people who are like real bastards, right?
It's a correlation. It's not a perfect, it's not a perfect relationship.
Right. But once you've already kind of retreated to the fact that it's only a statistical correlation, but you still got plenty of exemplars of all types, are you hoping to like roll the dice and have the statistics of the AI work out the same as the statistics of the humans?
I mean, that with, these arguments have to be taken together, right? So that with every other argument is just kind of another consideration. It's not the thing
Right.
we're just completely banking on, right? That's why it's a low probability.
So from my perspective, morality, I'm certainly not a moral realist, and I don't think you are either, right, in terms of like deep morality of the universe, correct?
Well, I talked to Matt Adelstein, the Bentham's Bulldog guy. He came to see me
Uh,
once in LA, and then he explained to me what moral realism was. And I ended up agreeing with him that I was a moral realist, but then I forgot what he said, and then I started saying I wasn't a moral realist again. So I don't know. I might be a moral realist. Depends on
Really?
these-
I just assumed you weren't. So moral realism is that I think I'm explaining I talked to him as well. It's just the idea that like in the laws of the universe, kind of like physics, but maybe it's like a separate type of physics, a separate magisterium, but it is as fundamental as physics, is this idea of like what correct morality is. And there's like one right answer to morality, not just for humans, but for like presumably any intelligent agent. So the orthogonality thesis, I guess, is totally false in some sense.
Well,
I don't know. It just seems, I don't know where you get this kind of fundamental morality.
well, that way you explain it doesn't sound convincing, but
Yeah, there's probably better ways to explain.
He-
I mean, it seems obviously wrong to me.
Yeah, the way he explained it was something along the lines of like, look, you can say some things are true and false, like someone is taller than the other, like based on like how we use language. I wasn't kind of clear exactly. Like it wasn't like anything mystical about it. You said sort of sounds like mystical, but his was like kind of like the way we use language. Like it does make sense to say there are moral truths. And we went back and forth. It was like a conversation like this where we like got into the weeds. Although like again, my
Yeah.
memory's not so good, so I can't remember like the contours. But I just remember the end. I was like, okay, I think you've convinced me.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I don't we'll continue with.
Yeah. So I brought this up because I wanted to highlight this is like an interest. I mean, the way you're thinking about this, I do think it's kind of like the way most people think about it, right? Kind of like the average default of how to think about this. But the way I think about it is like, I just feel like I have enough concepts to be like, the orthogonality thesis is totally true. So like in my mind, like
you don't think
there's
there's a
no reason.
correlation?
I agree that there's a statistical, we talked about why there's a statistical correlation in humans, but I don't think that arguing from human statistical correlations is going to actually correspond to what we're going to get from AIs.
You might be right. I mean, I don't know.
And so for me, it's the idea of, remember, we've got these reinforcement learning powers that are coming online. Like people, it's almost like a magic wand where, remember when we talked about like evolution being consequentialist, right? Like natural selection, it was just this, you can think of it like a black box. It's going to find the local optimum in gene space that gets you better vision, right? Because better vision makes you survive more. So stuff like that, you're going to have these magic wands where everybody can do the equivalent of like an entire evolutionary process happening within like hours. And they, they get their own custom built organism that's just driving the function that they want. I think we're going to have a world full of these kind of outcome oriented magic wands. And in that world, the idea that, also it's going to preserve morality, unless that's exactly the outcome you told to steer from, I just don't see why morality would pipe in. Maybe your answer would be like, okay, coalitional dynamics, but like it doesn't pipe in at a fundamental
It's
level.
not coalitional dynamics. It's like, I don't know. This entire thing of reasoning is like kind of mysterious. I mean, the whole kind of thing is kind of strange. And, I don't know, it correlates with humans. Like when you're a human, you overcome your instincts. You kind of want some things more than others. It's like you kind of understand that some things don't make sense. You have a moral sense. Now, it's just a bunch of hardware. Does it have that? Maybe not. Yeah, I mean, probably not. But I don't know. There's there's a part of me that just kind of, I don't have, again, I don't have like a good explanation for this one. It's just kind of like an intuition I put a little bit of stock in.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, let's just chug along here. Next stop. Superintelligent AI will find it useful to negotiate with us and keep us around, just as how humans could form mutually beneficial relationships with ants if we could get over the communication barrier.
Yeah, and then I had a link to Katja's Grace's piece on this. Basically, that she showed that ants, if we could communicate with ants, they could probably be much more efficient than humans at being janitors, getting into hard to reach spaces. We would have a lot of use for them. I mean, monkeys too, they go get coconuts. I mean, there's all kinds of things we could work out with animals. Um, if
We keep a lot of cows alive, right?
We keep a lot of cows alive, yeah, not in the best conditions, obviously. Um, but yeah, there could be some kind of like negotiation thing where, like, look, you can imagine the AI is like so smart, like it's kind of abundance. It's like we're so wealthy that like it doesn't cost it any, like it can get like 100% cooperation from us, just making life a little bit nicer, which doesn't cost us all that doesn't cost it all that much. Um, yeah, it could choose to do that.
Let me ask you this hypothetical. Imagine that there was no AI; it was just us humans, and we were plowing along doing genetic engineering, normal non-AI technologies. Do you think that the population of cows, let's say cows per human, or the human population is the same, let's say, do you think there's going to be more cows or less cows after decades of like human engineering?
Um, So this is interesting. I think if humans got to use genetic engineering and what people would want is intelligence, I think animal rights as a movement would take off. I think we'd have lab grown meat, and I think there would probably be a lot fewer cows.
Right, and even without the rights movement, just what I'm trying to get at here is the same way that we have fewer horses than we had before, right? So the idea is we have these animals,
The
and they
horse
quote
thing,
unquote trade with us.
I think I brought up the horse thing either in that article or a later article. The horse thing is interesting because the total utility for the average life of a horse is probably much, much better. And I'm not sure if it's like, net utility for horses has actually gone up or down.
Sure, sure. Okay, but there's certainly fewer of
There's
them, and
fewer of
and
them.
I think the large
There might be fewer better,
what's salient to me,
options. Yeah.
is that it's comparing humans' ability to engineer with natural selection's ability to engineer. So natural selection per year is much worse than a human brain operating on 1 year. But when you give it a billion-year head start, okay, yeah, it made cows which have tasty meat, right? Which we like to eat, or it made horses that can walk pretty well. Okay, yeah, give us a few years to work on it. Okay, we just made the horses. We've now deprecated the horses. Give us a few years, we're going to deprecate the cow. Why would I grow a whole cow when I can just grow the meat? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, but again, the problem with a lot of these things is we can't communicate with the animals, like the ox. If we could negotiate with the ox, it probably might not be able to do anything. You're right. With that one, it's kind of useless. There are a lot of
You talked about the ants, right? So like imagine like communicate with ants, like, oh, an ant could do my little jobs going into small spaces. So once again, yes, an ant is a robot that took a billion years to evolve, and we're going to need a whole another 5 years before we make a better robot than that.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's an empirical question again. Like, will we have things that are better at digging holes in the ground than ants in 5 years and building structures underground? I don't know. I don't know if that's true. But the better
Maybe you can
argument
agree that the
against
yeah.
is that ants are kind of special. Like, it doesn't work as much for pigs. It doesn't work as much for I don't know. Think of some koala. Like, what could a koala do for us? Nothing, right? Besides be cute. Like, that's all we
Right.
want. Like, there's nothing really a koala can do that we care about. So maybe that's the better argument, that we're like the koalas. We're not like the ants.
Well, I'm also happy to let you take the best animal you can, because I feel like even the best animal, even like the dog, which so many people love, I still think that robot dogs are going to make some headway. But there may be people who are essentialists about their dog, like, no, it has to be a genuine biological dog. In which
Well, I
case,
think
okay,
most
well, you
people. I
can't.
think almost all people will be like that.
I'm not going to go almost. I mean, look at what's happening with girlfriends, right? I think a lot of people are accepting the substitution of the Instagram model and the ChatGPT girlfriend. I wouldn't go so far as to say all humans, but let's say some
I don't know how
humans.
many. I mean, I'd like to see numbers on that. I'm not sure if those are anecdotal or those are a real trend.
Okay, okay. So maybe you and I can both agree that something like Ricardo's law of comparative advantage, that's not what's going to keep humans alive, correct?
It could. I mean, I would keep ants alive. It could. I'm saying it's not impossible.
You would keep ants alive until you have better ant robots, or until when?
Until you have better ant robots, we haven't had. I mean, like, I don't know if we
Okay.
have better ant robots. Yeah, you wouldn't keep ants alive, unless you cared about ants. But yeah, and you're going to say this evolution process is very slow compared to like very smart people. But the evolution thing, again, it had that head start, and that hard start is a big deal. And as the research, the R&D costs of building another ant when you have ants, and they're very cheap. Like, if you could communicate with them, they'd be very cheap. You could have a zillion ants doing a zillion things. It
Sure.
might never make sense to do the R&D to build a robot ant.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of your worldview just comes back to being skeptical that AI progress is really going to go that fast, or
If you
like
imagine, it's just like, yeah, I mean, like, a lot of things happen. Like, if you imagine that it's like, just kind of unlimited and very, very quick, or like very, quick and unlimited for the purposes of like our short time scales. And yeah, a lot of things become more concerning. Sure. It's not like a theoretical thing where it's like, no matter what we invent or no matter what happens, humans will be okay. I don't think that's a reasonable position. Like, is it worth worrying about as me in 2025, given my lifespan and given where we are in like the grand scheme of human history? That's the question.
Okay, next stop on the doom chain. Super AIs will be able to check and balance one another, which can create dangers for humanity, but opportunities for it to thrive.
Yeah,
For humanity to thrive.
you can imagine some fun things. Someone should write maybe there's some sci-fi out there about like one AI is there's like a good AI, a bad AI, or like they're equally, moral, and one of them comes to humans and says, "I'm warning you about this other AI, but ally with me. Like let's destroy this one company," and it like kinds of ends up working, and you might be manipulated, and maybe the AI takes over anyway, but maybe there's like an equilibrium, like a balance of power. It's kind of funny, like international relations. Like, why would you think there'd be like 5 big European states, and for like hundreds of years they would just balance, and none would just like ever take over another? It ends up working out, and it ends up working like today. It's a little bit different because we have morality and like norms against international law against occupying and conquered other countries, which some people think is not real, but I think is real. But through most of history, that hasn't been the case. And like, although norms have always kind of existed to a certain extent, still like conquest was accepted, and still there was this equilibrium, and that existed for hundreds of years. Whether that can exist on like and that seems to me a scenario where it'd be much less likely to exist than this would be, because there's like it's not just like a handful of countries. There's like a lot of companies and a lot of people and a lot of nations and a lot of individuals, firms. There's just like a lot of different poles going on, and you can imagine. So yeah, you can imagine this kind of balance.
So to clarify, I'll give you this hypothetical. So imagine there's 10 super optimizer, super intelligent AIs. They're all interested in some outcome that is unaligned with humanity's flourishing. They've basically all gone rogue, and they're all fighting it out. In that scenario, do you think that we potentially get a good outcome for humanity?
I think there's opportunities for humanity, in the sense that we are kind of, as long as we maintain some comparative advantage, we have, we're like it's like none of them have an air force, and like we're the only nation with an air force or something like that. It's like if there's kind of ability to negotiate and get credible commitments, and they could be like, oh, look at my source code, I could be a slave of humanity, just help me win. And maybe
But remember,
accounts
but all so you're saying, so if I understand correctly, you're saying it's like there's 10 giants fighting, but we have an opportunity then to like kind of play the middle and still have leverage, even though we're like much weaker than any individual AI.
Yeah, as long as we have something we're good at, we're comparatively good. If they're all better than us at everything and we're worthless, maybe it doesn't matter. But like, we have to get to that point, right? Like you could imagine some intermediate stage where they're really, really good at X, Y, and Z, but not, A and B, and we're still good at A and B. And in that case, if we're in that case and they're the ones who are really good at X, Y, Z are competing with one another, there's opportunities for humans to play an important role.
Right. Okay. It just seems to me like, I mean, I'm willing to grant some scenarios. Like, imagine one of the AI is actually really nicely aligned and it's like the perfect AI, but then it's fighting it out with 9 others. In that scenario, I'm willing to believe, okay, we'll get some value. Like, we'll get maybe a tenth of the value. Maybe they'll negotiate. But in my mind, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you really take 10 giants fighting and we're just ants, I just don't think the ants are going to play the middle of the giants fighting.
They could, if you just wanted to infect if it was like a war with a country and you can get all ants to like go to Russia and like create as much damage as possible. Like you can imagine the ants doing some, some damage, and you can imagine that screwing up another country. So that's not that implausible to me. You get birds.
All right.
You get birds. Let's go poop everywhere in China and like inconvenient places and just bury like, the capital in bird poop. Like, that would be
Yeah.
valuable in a war.
Okay. All right. All right. Good luck with that strategy. Last couple stops here. All right. Research into artificial intelligence will stagnate indefinitely, perhaps because it runs out of training data or some other reason. I guess we did actually cover that.
We've talked about this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on to the last stop here. We're fundamentally mistaken about the nature of this thing, intelligence. There are domain-specific abilities, and we've been misled by metaphors derived from the psychometric concept of G, Spearman's G. See also Robin Hanson talking about betterness. Yeah, so we've talked about that too. Any additional thoughts on that?
No, I think we covered both those topics pretty thoroughly.
Let me bring in some quotes from your buddies here. So Steven Pinker thought intelligence is a misgeneralization of the human G factor. He said there's no magic pixie dust. You can't just get to like a 300 or million IQ. You're just talking about G, which is specific to humans. And there's something that I agree with to what he's saying, which is like, if you look at a human, if you look at like, why does somebody have a really low IQ? A lot of times you can model it as like, well, they're like malfunctioning, right? They're like deficient. It's a deficiency. Like they have this architecture on how to have 100 IQ or more, but some of the stuff is like messed up. It didn't develop right. And so it's knocking out some of the IQ. And in that model, it's like straightforward to be like, well, you can fix the deficiency. You can get them back up to 100 or 110 IQ, but you just can't extrapolate that to them having 1,000 IQ. So I agree with him so far, but I still think there's still, if you look at the optimization power definition, it still suggests that humans aren't like the ultimate optimizers.
It still suggests that humans are not the ultimate optimizers. Yeah, that's right. You get back to this thing where it's like, we're going to optimize everything, and therefore, yeah, all bets are off. Sure. I mean, it's just, but it's like, and then I get back to my idea that it's, things exist in the environment, and there's coalitions, and there's spiky intelligence, and there's all these things that could potentially go wrong with that story.
Okay, and then, Robin Hanson, I think we both like this post. Remember the betterness explosion? Is a very nice turn of phrase by Robin. He wrote this post kind of making fun of people talking about like intelligence being the ultimate skill. And he's saying like, imagine one day somebody came up with theories of how to be better. And they're like, wow, these are so good. They help us to be better. We could make everything better. And then we can use the betterness we can turn it on ourselves and become better, even better. So he was kind of parroting this intelligence thing. And I think where I came out on that is ultimately I just bite the bullet and I'm like, yep, that's possible to do in the sense of optimization power.
We can just be better. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think the problem is it's kind of ill-defined, and I think that's the issue. And it's the same thing with the, like we talked about with intelligence, where it's like we're good at doing some things and we're super intelligent, the ChatGPT is super intelligent in some way, not in others. We're brilliant in some ways, idiots in others. That's kind of, that's I think the nature of that argument.
If you look at evolutionary time and you look at humans coming on the scene from the perspective of other apes, I think what they saw was a fast betterness explosion. And by fast, I mean, okay, it took hundreds of thousands of years, but still, it was an explosion in evolutionary time, right? The way we're occupying other niches, like that's unheard of in evolutionary time.
Betterness. I mean, I don't know. It's like, it's kind of, it's ill-defined because like we're better than them at like building cities, but like, they're better than us at surviving in the wild. I mean, we've kind of lost some things along the way too. We've lost some strength. I mean, if we were kind of weak, they could kind of destroy us in hand-to-hand combat. So I don't know. It's like, what's better? It's kind of based on the perspective. I mean, I think that's the.
So remember, the way to avoid the semantics and just talk about what's actually scary is when you talk about steering the universe, right? Steering the future of the universe. Because like, yes, there are certain contests that certain animals could beat me in. But ultimately, when it comes to the future of the universe, those contests have a way of not being relevant.
We've done nothing to the future of the universe. I mean, we've done nothing so far. I mean, the world by like the.
Well, we've certainly steered the planet in many ways, right? I mean,
Sure.
We've terraformed the planet to be more
on
conducive
one
to human
level,
life.
from the perspective of the planet, yeah, from this perspective of the universe or the solar system, like aliens watching it, maybe not. Maybe we're not that important.
I mean, even if there were no superintelligent AI, wouldn't you extrapolate that humans are going to like terraform the solar system eventually?
I mean, assuming that doom doesn't get in the of some kind of doom, not just AI, but something doesn't get in the way, we're going to terraform the universe.
Or the solar system, or at least Mars, right? I mean, maybe not on
Maybe
Elon's
Mars. Yeah,
timeline,
maybe
right? But if you
Mars.
give us a few centuries,
There's
even without AI, I think Mars will get terraformed.
Yeah, I mean, look, like if you just stipulate we never die, I mean, that's just like the possibilities are kind of endless. We could go evolutionarily backwards. I mean, you could imagine, we could not die and like have something else, like some fundamentalist religion takes over the world where against technology and we kind of evolve back into something else, right? So like we don't die, but we evolve in another direction. Like, no, I think you'd have to assume that there's not going to be doom from something, and then still things could go wrong. But yeah, if you say forever, then like we're going to survive forever, then I guess everything is going to be possible because forever is a long time.
All right, well, getting close to the wrap up here. So that was basically the doom train. We hit on all the stops. Your general take on most of the stops is like, yeah, intuitively you're kind of sympathetic to the stop, but maybe, like you gave me a lot of maybes. And I remember in your article, you said, I think you netted out at a 12% probability after combining your doom train. And now I think in our conversation now, I think maybe you said it's more like 5%. So I don't know, is that roughly 5 to 12%?
Yeah, we're still roughly in the same. We're still roughly in the same area. Yeah. I said 12. That's why I kind of asking people probability. If you ask me 2 different days, like, I don't know if much.
Yeah.
Probably I've been influenced a little bit by the fact that, we didn't die, because like people with fast timelines are always arguing for really, really fast timelines. So every kind of month or every year we go on and like the world hasn't ended, or like there hasn't been a 9/11 caused by AI or something. Yeah, I mean, I update on that.
Yeah, if I were to recap kind of how I see your thought process a little different from mine is I find certain arguments to be like the ones that really carry the day. Like that the idea of like instrumental convergence. I'm like, yep, this is definitely going to be a major factor in the future. Is the idea that AIs that are kind of goal oriented become more goal oriented, which makes them more competitive. Like, yep, I'm ready to embrace the fact that we're going to have very hardcore optimizing AIs controlling the world soon. And you're like, yeah, maybe, right? That's kind of like the difference between me and you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, few things are just kind of knockdown arguments. It's just, it's there and it's interesting, and that's why it's not crazy that kind of AI doom has become a thing, because the instrumental convergence is a powerful argument. It's something that I've heard, but still, I mean, there's just my perspective is just there's a lot more going on in the world.
Yep. Can we quickly touch on unemployment doom? You've actually written somewhat extensively about this, right? Where you're actually kind of optimistic that a significant fraction of the economy will still be there for humans, and as long as we have a non-zero fraction, if we can all migrate to whatever fraction is left, we could potentially have really high salaries because the world will be so rich. So, do you think we'll have this like rich, slightly smaller universe of jobs, or do you think it'll kind of go to zero?
No, I think there's going to be always jobs, because like the wealthier you get, like the more jobs there are, because there's more room for specialization. And so as long as humans can do, I mean, this goes back to these discussions whether AI will be able to eventually do everything. Even if it can't, assuming there's no doom, there's still a preference for humans. And if we're so rich, we can indulge our kind of arbitrary preference. You could say, I just want to go to a restaurant where humans are serving me. I want to watch porn with humans. I want to do humans. I mean, people are going to have that kind of preference. And if they're that rich, they can afford to indulge it. So I'm not worried about it. And then on top of that, the trend for like the welfare state is it gets larger over time. So like, we'll be wealthy and we'll be redistributing money. So I don't think that this is something to worry about. I think that like doom is like some serious, but this kind of AI kind of job apocalypse, I think that's like kind of textbook Ludditism. I don't think that that's something to worry about.
So there's two subpoints that are interesting to me. One is what you touch on of like how many jobs are really going to be that essentialist human. I can tell you, me personally as a customer, 95% of my dining, I'm happy to just pay to get the best food, and I will not pay extra for human involvement. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I'll pay for human involvement. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe a lot of people are more sociable than you are. No, I'll go to I'll go to the checkout. I'll go to the self checkout at the store. But I don't know. Like I went to Amazon. There's an Amazon Prime. Was it Amazon Prime? It's some kind of Amazon like completely automated grocery store, and there were no people, so it wasn't just self checkout line. It was like basically there's nobody. Like it just kind of scans your phone and like it charges you on like your card. It's like all done through Amazon, and it was kind of depressing. I didn't like this kind of warehouse where I just go in, I get the food, and I get out. I prefer the supermarket, but then at the supermarket I would go to the self checkout line as long as there's somebody potentially there. I could like see some people. That's like not as depressing to me.
Right. This is kind of like the Walmart greeter economy, right? Like there's going to be so many Walmart greeters. They're going to be in every aisle.
Yeah. I mean, if why not? If you can afford it. I mean, like, I think our norms should change too. Like, I don't know, in Japan, like, I think I don't know much about this, but I heard about this one time where you can, like, just go and, like, you pay girls to, like, laugh and flirt with you. Like, that's kind of, there's, like, social norms against that here. But, like, I think some of those social norms should change. We should be more comfortable with, like, just paying for people to do stuff that only humans can do.
Okay, so we kind of disagree on that. And then the other part of the unemployment is when you said like, well, ultimately it'll be fine because we'll be so rich and we'll have like welfare. Gradual disempowerment and the intelligence curse, two of these papers or websites that came out recently, they made a very good point that even if we're all unemployed, but we technically own this capital or we're collecting these dividends, we still become very low power relative to our governments, whether the government is pure human or human plus AI or AI, whatever it is, the individual workers no longer have a certain dose of power that they've had throughout history.
They don't have the power. So the government gives you a lot of money. I mean, then you have less power. I don't know. I think I think that we've gotten welfare. I think the average citizen has more, more kind of power over his government. And I think part of it is like Actually, the biggest factor in that is like how ideological the government is and like what the government actually cares about. Because if the government cares about incorporating people as a matter of values, that's one thing. If the government just is kind of theocratic or extreme or just has this ideology that it wants to force on people, that's completely something else. So um, that seems like the best predictor of that. And then like as we get wealthier, I don't know. I think the moral trend is kind of towards the softer, more humane values here.
Well, the particular thing that's breaking is generally, currently in the world today, anytime you have a country where 60% of the people become really adamant about something, then they just have the power to move their government because the government's going to be screwed. Like they're not even going to be able to retain power if 60% of the people are that angry. But in the future, those 60% are all going to be economically impotent. And even if they want to go do something, it's trivial for the government to be like, nope, I can prevent you from doing that. And you don't have any resources to do that with, right? So that's going to
Or
shift the
government, I
balance.
mean, government could theoretically do that now. That's not the like government could shut off your, I don't know, power, electricity. It could do a lot of things if it wanted to target people.
Right, but 60% of the population, they've got lots of economic power that they won't in the future.
Government could. I mean, government can right now shut off like whatever faction it needs to make them a minority. Yeah, yeah. So the government will have because the people will because the labor will not be valuable. Is that the argument? The government,
Exactly, right? I mean, the government depends on the economic power of its people. Now, the analogy that they made, the authors of the paper, was to like oil nations, right? Where it's like, no, the government just gets money from oil and the people just, and those nations tend to be quite oppressive.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess kind of. So yeah, also like the kind of not creating, drama for people not like. I mean, assume we still have democracy, right? Like people can still vote. Assume we don't have democracy. I don't know. People can have like kind of mass resistance, kind of put gears into the system. Whatever the government cares about, people can kind of figure it out and try to disrupt. People will have a lot of time on their hands if they're not working so much. They'll be able to have communications technology. They'll be able to organize. So, you can still imagine there's ways to push back too.
Okay, so that's your take on gradual disempowerment. All right, so wrapping it all up, sometimes I give, the ideological Turing test and I summarize the other person's views. I think I kind of did. You're very like, a la carte, right? Like, I feel like you don't really have like a grand perspective here. You're just kind of like iffy on every stop on the doom train.
Yeah, I mean, on the AI thing, I'm usually not like that on most issues. I usually have kind of a harder position, which is why I don't spend a lot of time writing about AI. Although, I wrote those few articles that you've cited, but have been still happy to have this conversation. But yeah, I don't, feel very confident about much of this.
As a final question, what do you think about the meta question of like, would you agree that there's smart people on both sides, both doom and non-doom?
Yes, I will grant you. Smart people on both sides. Yes.
There's a lot of people out there who, mostly on the non-doomer side, who like to just character assassinate with a broad brush. Like everybody who's a doomer, they have like psychological issues, or remember
Yeah,
Mark
they probably
Andreessen's,
would
they're a
acknowledge.
Baptist or a
Yeah,
bootlegger.
they probably would acknowledge they're intelligent, but I think they think there's some kind of something very wrong going on with their reasoning process, and I don't necessarily believe that. Yeah, I think that people get there for reasons that kind of make sense to me.
Would you agree? It seems like, an observation I've had is anytime you have a contentious subject, right, whether it's like Israel, Palestine, or crypto, there used to be a lot of crypto debates, or now we're talking about AI. Anytime you've got a contentious subject, as just a matter of numbers, you will just have like a million smart people on both sides. And you can't just character assassinate the other side. You have to just objectively slug it out. And of course, to one side, it's always crazy how did all those smart, like I'm an atheist, right? And I see like some extremely smart, extremely religious people. And I'm like, what the hell? How did you get over to that side? But that doesn't mean I can just character assassinate them. I just have to grapple with their arguments.
Mm, yeah, I agree. It's good to. Sometimes people are idiots, though. Sometimes it is worthwhile to just, say people are kind of foolish. It's not character assassination just to say people are very, very wrong. If they are wrong, like I think some people have terrible views, and it's worth pointing that out. But yeah, this is, I think, not one of those cases.
Right. So, and just for the viewers, so as a non-doomer, or rather somebody who's like still a slight doomer, I mean, you still grant, I'd say, at least 5%, right? So you're an open-minded
Yeah,
non-doomer.
or
You're
again,
still in the sane zone.
large, wide confidence interval. So that makes me understand.
Exactly.
Right.
So as a non-doomer, you're still agreeing that being a doomer doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you like
you're not a bad
epistemologically clueless.
My friend Brian Cho thinks that. You ever talk to Brian Cho? He thinks so.
So I haven't talked to them one-on-one, but actually that's the kind of person that I'm thinking about, right? I mentioned like the Mark Andreessen, the Brian Chow. They're like, not only do I disagree with this person, the other side, but the other side is like committing discourse offenses or epistemology offenses. So I think I'm happy to grant that the non-doomer side doesn't have bad character, doesn't have bad epistemology. They're just grappling with the arguments.
Well,
And
limited.
it sound, Brian is somebody who's like not even that generous for his part.
Yeah, maybe you're being too kind. I don't know. I could talk to Brian. I could tell Brian to to talk to you if you want and see what he says.
Sure. All right, sounds good. Yeah. So Richard, I think this whole discussion, I thought you were super open-minded. Didn't try to push your ideology or just listened, reasoned it out, and you even did that thing that I had to call out, where you like are willing to grant my hypotheticals. I always love it when people do that. Yeah. So thanks very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.